What is up everyone? It's me D2 and welcome back to my channel. So I recently finished watching Avatar for the first time. Wait, wrong Avatar. So I recently finished watching Avatar.
My name is Aang. And I'm the Avatar.
What the f? So I recently finished watching Avatar for the first time. Yeah! I was super inspired by the show and it really reminded me how, as a kid, many of us had wild imaginations and would have the best times of our lives pretending to be someone like Aang, who has these awesome powers and abilities. So I decided to relive that fantasy by turning it into a video game so I can finally become Aang for real. This is going to be the first video of a mini devlog series, and I plan to release this game soon for free so we can all become the Avatar. So hit that subscribe button now if you don't want to miss out. Now with that said, let's buckle up and jump straight into the making of my dream Avatar game. For those of you who live under a rock and don't know who Aang is, such as myself a year ago, he's an avatar who can bend elements such as water, earth, fire, and air. One thing that excited me the most is Aang's airbending abilities. I've always loved playing with wind in games, so I thought this is the perfect opportunity to take it to the next level. I wanted to focus on his airbending skills first, and if I have time, I can add in the other bendings later. So I started by prototyping some reactive wind shader so I can pass in the moving position of a wind volume and have all the wind reactors react to it. I adapted this reactive wind shader to work with some of the assets I made for my Demeter project so I can get a better idea visually how this effect may feel, but I plan to replace them with new assets later. As an artist, I tend to want to focus on the artistic presentation of my game first, but then I remember that a wise man once said that a game full of cool art without good mechanics to support it is not a game at all. I said that myself. Anyway, I moved on to prototype some gameplay mechanics. Originally, I thought having a first-person view would help make the experience feel more immersive, but after prototyping the shader, I quickly realized that's not the case. It was very hard to notice the wind effects, and it would be much more difficult to convey Aang's agile and flexible movements if all the players could see were his arms. So I made a transition to a third-person controller instead, and it worked out a lot better. I hooked up the attack animations to launch wind projectiles, so the wind reactors will react to each combo Aang executes. The effect is kind of rough right now, but I'll polish it later. Currently, there are two types of attacks. Basic attack combo, which is the main way to deal damage to an enemy, and a radial attack to not only push back nearby enemies, creating more space for the player, but also deflects nearby enemy projectiles if timed correctly. As you can see, there are also two types of enemies in the game, melee and ranged. I gave them some HP, then added ragdoll effects when the enemies are killed. What? All of the animation you see so far are downloaded from Mixamo, while the mannequin model I grabbed and modified from Unity's standard package. I'm using these to speed up my prototyping process and will replace them with custom-made assets when I do the art pass, which you'll see some later in the video. At this point, I realized I needed a way to better aim at the target I wanted to attack. So I took a look at the targeting system from the game Demon Souls and tried to reverse engineer the logic as best as I could. In the end, I implemented a system which will highlight the best candidate within a certain range, and players will be able to toggle the target lock system on and off at any time to focus on the enemy they want to prioritize attacking on. You can switch targets to the left and right, and it auto-locks on the next best available candidate if your current lock-on target is killed. This is where I noticed the fireballs can be quite easily avoided by sidestepping because the enemy is shooting at a last known position of the player as soon as the projectile is launched. Therefore, between the time the fireball is launched and when it supposedly arrives at the target location, even if the player only moves an inch to the side, that difference in distance wouldn't be accounted for, and the fireball will miss the target. So I made a slight adjustment in the algorithm by using the player's current velocity to predict approximately where they will be at once the fireball arrives. This instantly made the enemy more accurate. Perhaps a little too accurate. I'll probably nerf the prediction logic eventually, but for now I'm moving on. At this point, I felt like I had the foundation of the game laid out, so I started building a blockout level to help visualize the entirety of the game better. I made a blockout of the Southern Air Temple, where Aang originally resided before he became the Avatar. This is the place where Aang was first discovered as an airbending prodigy, but when he left to fulfill his duty as the Avatar, he got into trouble and froze himself for 100 years, only to find out a century later that the air nomads originally residing at the temple have all been wiped out by the Fire Nation. So the story I'm going with here in my game is that Aang came back to find the temple occupied by Fire Nation soldiers and needs to do everything he can to regain control. I added a simple scoring system where the players earn different amounts of points based on the type of enemies killed and the way you defeat it. For example, you'd earn more points killing enemies with a deflective fireball attack as opposed to using the basic attack. This is just so I have a simple gameplay loop in place, but I might adjust it later. Now that I have some basic gameplay in place and a simple objective setup for the player, I began tackling some of the art assets. In order to capture the comic cell shaded stylization look, I did some research by watching these tutorials. I then combined the knowledge I learned and added my own twist on top of it. For the tree leaves, I did some research online and found this fluffy tree tutorial. After some experimentation, it turns out this style works great with the cell shaded tree trunk I just made. Once I got all these figured out, I just had to combine the result with the rest of my wind reactor shader, and boom! Here are some cute little bonsai trees. The majority of techniques used were from the tutorials I mentioned, with the main difference being that I'm using a custom-made tileable tree bark normal map to get those internal lighting details when the tree trunk is lit from an angle, which helps add more color variation overall. I have a link to all of these tutorials in the description. Go check them out, and let me know in the comments if you want me to dive deeper into how I made my version of the shader. From here, I moved on and began making probably the most high-profile asset I was planning to make for this game, Aang's model. I sculpted him in ZBrush, then did the usual procedure of retopologizing and UV unwrapping. If you don't know what these terms mean, go check out this video I made, in which I go into more details explaining a streamlined asset creation process used by many industry professionals. Link in the top right corner of the video and also in the description. Texturing Aang was fairly simple. The only thing I really need to bring into the engine is the base color and normal map. Most of it was just sampling the colors from a screenshot of Aang and filling out all the big color sections in my texturing program. Here's a side-by-side comparison of how it looks in the texturing program versus in the game with the proper shader applied. Not gonna lie, I was surprised how well this turned out and was genuinely happy with the result. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments, I'd love to hear your thoughts. The next step was probably where I had the most fun by far, the animation. I really wanted to reflect Aang's agility as much as I could in the animation, so I went with a more stylized approach. The main thing I focused on when animating him was hitting big and exaggerated poses. It'd be like that sometimes. By focusing more on getting the bigger and more visually important poses right, I was able to add a little bit more life and quirkiness to these animations. I also stylized the swing attacks by adding exaggerated bending on Aang's glider like shown on the screen here, which, when played in real time in game, helps add more bounciness to the overall feelings of the animation and also simulates kind of a fake motion blurring effect. As someone who's not a professional animator, I was very happy with how the animations turned out. I literally couldn't stop swinging my attacks in the game because I just loved how it looked so much. Anyways, that pretty much sums up this devlog. Comment down below if there's anything you want to see added to the game. One of the biggest things I'm focusing on next is artifying the entire level. There are also quite a few other things gameplay wise I plan to implement, so stay tuned if you're interested to see more. If you want to try this game out, be sure to like and subscribe, and follow me on Twitter and Instagram for more frequent updates. This game will be available for download for free once I complete it, so don't miss out. And with that said, I will see you all next time. Peace!